Welcome everybody to today's tech webinar, and we're still in Servoy 2019-03 launch mode, and today we're also going to be announcing Servoy World during this session, and I'm actually live from a Servoy client in Canada, ProSoft XP, who is kindly hosting me today. And quite some content to cover, so let's get started, Sean.
Okay. Happy first day of spring, right? Today's the vernal equinox.
I think it is, yeah. Or is it 21st? I'm not sure on that.
I can't remember. I think it was today. And today, I think that it also coincides with the supermoon, which is when the full moon is the closest point in its orbit, and it's full, and it coincides with the vernal equinox, which is, I think, pretty special. So, because everything is aligned, I think we should be announcing Servoy World 2019 in this webinar. We're going to make you wait until the end of the webinar because, we have to do that. But the good news is everyone in this webinar will get a bit of early jump on registration because we don't do a full public announcement until the end of today, North America time. So that gives everyone in this webinar a chance to get in and get their hotel rooms booked, because I think there's a limited availability this year at the main conference hotel. So if you are interested, then stick around to the end of the webinar and we'll post the information and the links. But today we're going to be discussing continuing our launch series. The Q1 build from 2019 is in release candidate 1. Actually, release candidate 2 is now built and will be released tomorrow. But we'll be in release candidate mode for probably another week or two as we get cases and fix those and make sure everything is stable. Last webinar, in case you missed it, it was all about the no CSS theming. We're working hard to remove the requirement that you must know CSS from the product. Of course, you can always use it if you want to. That one is recorded, and we'll be posting the recording very shortly in case you missed it. Today's webinar is about an oAuth plugin, which is included in the 2019-03 build. So now it's more baked into the product and allows you to do various API integrations. So I'll do a short demo, and then we'll do some overview on oAuth itself. So I'm going to go into Servoy Developer and launch the NG client. And the example I want to show you is very simple and won't take very long. And then we'll kind of walk through how it was done and do a bit of overview. And then we'll talk about Servoy World. So I expect that we will be a pretty quick webinar today. And the use case here is primarily what a lot of companies are doing now, which is sort of outsourcing their authorization or giving the option to outsource authorization to their platform. And so you can use something like Google or LinkedIn or some other big identity management platform to verify who you are. One of the benefits of this is that if you allow your users to log in to your application using, for example, their LinkedIn account, then you don't have to go through the trouble of having them register their username and their password and sending them their password or password resets and all that stuff. So that can be quite useful, and it's pretty easy to build, and it all hinges on a technology called oAuth, which is in its second iteration, oAuth 2.0, and it's the process by which one application can grant permissions to another application by sort of passing control to the user momentarily. And that's what I'm going to demonstrate right now. So I've arrived at my generic application here. I can log in or I can connect with LinkedIn. So I will click this button here. It's now passing control away from my application to the LinkedIn authorization page. and because there are some local storage, it already knows who I am. If I was running in incognito mode in my browser, for example, I would be required to authenticate with LinkedIn, with my username and password for LinkedIn. But because it sets some cookies and tracks what I do, it already knows that it's me. I'm going to click allow, and you can see what it's giving access to. You have some control over this depending on what the service is, but it's just going to get my basic profile and my email address. Now it returns control to my application. You can see I have a wonderful one form application here, but I've pulled in my profile information from LinkedIn upon authorization. So this is quite handy because if you are registering people for a SaaS application and you want them to type in their email and their information and create a password and all that, you're also kind of counting on them to not give you their junk email that they never check, and then you don't really know who they are and you have no way to reach them. This is quite nice because it really does verify their identity, and you'll be able to capture a lot of information like what company they work for, which then you can get more information about from LinkedIn, like number of employees, etc., if it's shared. So you can see that I've pulled a few things, including the email address. So that's typically what is used as a unique identifier in an application, and also the profile picture, which is you can show them a picture of themselves. That's a picture of me, and I guess people like to see a picture of themselves. So that's the demo. It is quite short, but I think that's good because it makes things very simple. And let's take a look at how it's done. I want to start with that main login page. Let me clean up some space here in Servoy Developer. So you can see that I have this button, Connect with LinkedIn. And if I look at the properties of that button, I have a small event in the form. I made a method called initialize. I made a small scope to sort of wrap the LinkedIn service, but this is not anything special. This is just what I set up this morning to sort of wrapped around that plugin. But here you see where we talk to the plugin. The first thing you have to do when you're using oAuth is to provide the what's called the client ID and client secret. Those two bits of information are standard in the oAuth protocol. Every service that provides oAuth as its authentication scheme will have a client ID and client secret. Now that is not the ID of the user who's logging in. This is the ID of the application that is being granted access to a user's LinkedIn profile, for example. So I'll show you where I obtain this in a minute. But the plugin that is now included in the Q1 build of Servoy has the ability to do a LinkedIn call. And what I pass into it is that client ID and client secret, which tells me it's my demo app. And also, this is something called scopes. These two bits of information here. Scopes is another part of the oAuth standard. And these are what you're granting access to, or what you're requesting access to, in fact. And that is basic profile and email address. And you saw that when it passed control to LinkedIn, that it had two bullet points there, and one was the basic profile and one was email address. So it literally showed me what the demo app is asking for. Finally, there is a callback, because the way oAuth works is it's kind of a multi-step process. You pass control to the service, and then it does the authorization, and then it does a redirect back to or wherever you specify, but in this case back to this application, and then it passes in an authorization code, which you can then keep as a token and send with multiple subsequent requests. So on authorize is the callback. So those are kind of the main ingredients to getting started. It's just one line of code, but then you have to handle that on authorize method. That is actually handled as a deep link. So I'll take you to what happens next. The deep links, by the way, work best if you put them in a globals scope, so a top-level scope that's actually named globals.js, even though you can name scopes whatever you want. So if I sort of find this method, and I'll use my Servoy resource locator, I have it here on authorize, and what it passes in is the this is the standard Servoy deep link protocol, but it passes that code in as an argument called code, and then I just forward it back to that LinkedIn scope that I made, and I do a few more things. One is I set the access token that was passed in back into the service object that I made when I initialized it, and the next thing I do is I just load the profile, which is this method here. And so this is the next time that I use the plugin and the next time that I call the service. Here's where things become a bit more customized, because you have to know a bit about the service that you're using and what the endpoints are and what it expects and what it returns. So I consulted the LinkedIn API documentation and found it pretty easy to specify what fields I want from the profile, and I put those here. They get built into the URL here, and then I call this oAuth plugin again on line 90 to generate that service request for that URL endpoint, and then I get back the result. I specify that I want it as JSON in the header here. Some services do that automatically. Some are XML by default unless you say JSON. So again, that's where you have to consult the documentation. But here I get that profile object, and it has all the fields that I requested, and I just sort of copied those into some fields that I'm tracking in this scope up top, and that's what that form is bound to, including that picture URL, which I was able to put on the form. So that was pretty much the full round trip end to end. I think it's worth showing you a bit about how to set this up on the service side, because there's some things you have to do on the API that you're using. So if I go back to my browser here, first I'd like to point out that if you go to linkedin.com/developers, that's where you'll find your where you can register your product or your application. So if I go to my home page here, you can see that I have recent apps. So I have already created this app, and it has some information on there. And if you go to the auth section, you can see the client ID and the client secret. So those get generated for you, and you have to know those back in your integration. That's what I passed into to the plugin to initialize the service. Then there are the different permission names, or they call them scopes sometimes. You have to know these by name, because you also pass in a list of them, because this is the options that you have for what you want to grant permission to. And I had picked basic profile and email address, but you can go a step further. If you're a company admin, then you can specify access to that, as well as to things that you have shared, etc. So that's the next bit of information to know. And then finally, you have to know, excuse me, the redirect URLs that you're going to need, and then you have to register them here. So as a matter of security, I can't just call LinkedIn and say I want to, authorize, and then it's going to redirect anywhere. It has to be already registered, so that in here it was. You can see I was testing some things, but it was this middle one here, this unauthorized. That was the method that got called via deep link. So you have to register the callback URL. So it's really those few steps. When you're testing this, you'll notice that once you've authenticated, it kind of remembers you, and so the next time you come in, it won't pass control again, because you yourself, as the LinkedIn user, are already granted you've already granted access, so it won't always go to that login page where you log in through LinkedIn. If for testing reasons you want to, well, I'll show you what that looks like. So if I'll close the application and I'll relaunch the NG client, and this time when I connect with LinkedIn, it didn't pass control. It went directly and got my profile information because I'm already saying, yeah, this demo Servoy app can use my profile, right? If I wanted, for testing purposes, to go and kind of remove that so that I can test the workflow again, I come in here to my own personal LinkedIn account and go to partners and services. Probably have to refresh this because I had removed it. Yeah. So there you can see that that I've allowed Servoy access to my application, and I can come in here and remove this the next time I access the application. It's going to pass control back to LinkedIn and require that I reauthorize it before it goes further. So that's just something that's nice to know when you're testing, and most services, and not just LinkedIn, will have this so that you can go in and control which applications can access your information on their platform, and that's a good way when you remove that to keep retesting that sort of authorization workflow. I'm going to just do a quick overview of some slides about what oAuth is, and we'll take some questions and we'll do the Servoy World announcement. Just the oAuth, and we're now in the 2.0 version of that and have been for a few years, is an industry standard for allowing applications to talk to each other, but it puts the user in the middle and gives the user control over which applications have access to which platforms. It's also a developer specification for how the authorization workflow will proceed, and that's why we're able to build a plugin that provides this workflow for you so that you don't have to do a lot of the low-level programming. I should point out that the plugin is right now designed to work with Facebook, LinkedIn, and Office 365 Active Directory services. If we need to add more services, we can, but what we decided to do is kind of bake those into the plugin so that you don't have to go and re-implement different service endpoints. We can also look at shipping a helper module, like I made that little LinkedIn scope to kind of wrap those transactions as well. But anyway, back to the overview, what you can do with oAuth is you can get secure access to a third-party platform. You can get two applications to talk to each other without ever exposing any credentials. So it's not like you're sending your LinkedIn password into the demo Servoy app or anything like that. And I think the third point is what's nice for software vendors is that you can use a third-party platform as an identity management system, and you can start to outsource that and remove that burden from your own application. Okay, we'll take some questions, but first, and I'll leave this up while we take questions. So Servoy World will be this year in November 6th through 9th. The conference days are always 2 days, and those will be the 7th and the 8th. We typically do a pre and post conference training. However, this year we're going to do something fun. We have a hackathon scheduled on the pre-conference training and a simultaneous ISV summit. But the hackathon will be, I think, a lot of fun and a lot of way to get some energy into the start of the conference. There will be, I think, a way to enter as teams, and I think we'll do something like a small fee for it that will result in a donation to charity for the hackathon. We're still working out the details for that. And then on the 9th, after the conference, we'll do 4 half-day workshops instead of full-day trainings. And I think what we'll plan to do is to make these a bit more interactive than they've been in the past. So not just straight up classroom trainings, but we're going to get lots of Servoy experts in the room. And we're going to do, we'll cover, it'll be topical, and we'll cover these topics with Servoy experts in the rooms with you to help you So not just a teacher-student kind of setup in a full day setting. We'll do 4 half-day workshops in 2 separate tracks. The link below is for you to register. I'll leave that up during the question and answer session, so you can copy that down and get in and get registered if you are one of those people that likes to be an early bird. Jan, do we have any questions?
Yeah, there's a couple of questions coming in, and if anybody has any, then feel free to post them now. There's a question from Imre: is post new LinkedIn update or comment implemented currently in this plugin?
Well, the plugin itself doesn't do anything with LinkedIn. It just gives you the authorization hook. So once you are authorized, then you can send requests to any endpoint that the API provides.
Right.
So yeah, if you want to comment or like things on the LinkedIn, and I don't know the details of the API and support for that, but if the API supports it, then you can use the plugin to do this, and you have to use oAuth to do that. You can't talk to any endpoints in the service without that authorization token.
Okay, so it's good to keep in mind that this is a generic oAuth plugin and not a LinkedIn specific plugin. Which leads to the next question of Ruben: is it possible to use a custom oAuth provider like WSO2 Identity Server, which supports oAuth and OpenID Connect?
Yeah, absolutely. That's one of the, I think, one of the biggest benefits of this technology and the plugin is that you can outsource that authorization step to. Now there's lots of consumer-facing products will do the social platforms like Google or LinkedIn or Facebook, and log in with one of those. But a lot of the business SaaS offerings are now starting to use some of these security companies which do identity management as a service. Companies like Okta, we did a webinar on Okta several episodes ago, and not only did we show identity management as a service, but then it had baked into it some extras like multi-factor authentication. So it can send you a SMS code or an email code for a 2-step, and it manages all that for you. All of that runs on top of oAuth as a way of verifying between these 2 applications who the user is.
Cool. And one final question: where can I get this plugin?
Okay, it is shipped with the latest version of Servoy, so the 2019 .03 release, the Q1 release, which was released a few weeks ago as a release candidate. The RC2 build will be available tomorrow, and it will go final in a few weeks. So if you go to servoy.com/download, that's where you can get the installer for that. If you've already installed it and you want to run an update, you can use the update site in Eclipse. There's instructions for that on the forum as well. But it's in the installation, so you don't have to go to any web package and install it. It should be there. Currently, as I said before, we support LinkedIn and Facebook and Office 365. Please reply to the forum thread or send me an email directly if you are interested in another service, because it's not really much work to add additional services that are based on oAuth, because it is a standard protocol.
Okay, there's a follow-up question. Is this plugin different from the one that I found on Servoy Forge?
Okay, yeah, there was an earlier incarnation of this kind of same plugin on Servoy Forge. I believe that was based on oAuth 1.0. So this would be all of these companies are now on oAuth 2.0. So you probably don't want to use that plugin. Maybe we should also kind of deprecate that project on Servoy Forge. That's a third-party website, but I believe we were contributors to that. So we probably want to deprecate that and direct everyone to this new plugin, which is shipped inside Servoy. I also want to point out there is another oAuth project floating out there. So just to avoid confusion, there's a module available through the web package manager called SVY oAuth. And that also does the same thing, but it's a little bit more do-it-yourself, so you have more control. But then you also have more work to do. Also, it's based on the Google client libraries, and so there's a bunch of jar files that you have to include. So the setup of it is a bit clunky and not so nice. It does require that you program a bit more than what I showed you today. So probably the way forward is that project will be deprecated as well, and everything will be supported inside this oAuth plugin. So please file feature requests, send emails to me, post on the forum for your API service integration needs, because if they run on the oAuth standard, it's fairly easy to add them to be supported.
All right, and what if I want to use this plugin in an older version of Servoy?
That's a good question. I hadn't thought of that. It is a standalone plugin. I don't know if it has any dependencies on the core of Servoy. I think it was actually available in one of the rebuilds of 8.4. So if you were to download Servoy 2019-03 and copy the jar file from that plugin folder into your plugin folder in whatever build you're using, you could test it. I don't know if there are any dependencies on any libraries in Servoy core, though. That's I'll have to take that one offline. But you can try it the way I described by copying it in.
Okay, it's good to know. All right, that's it for questions today. Yeah, for those eager to subscribe to Servoy World, then now is the time to do that. We will be announcing it to the rest of the world very soon. So if you want to be quicker, then it's up to you. What's up for the next one, Sean?
So we're looking to do an episode on an update on using grids in Servoy. So that'll be in 2 weeks.
Cool.
And I'll put up some useful links here as we close out. Don't forget to download Servoy at servoy.com/download. You can watch any recordings of any prior webinars. This is number 54, so there's a lot in our archive at the Tech Series homepage. And please give your questions, comments, and abuse on the forum thread.
Excellent. Well, thanks all for attending, and we will see you in 2 weeks. Thank you.